Welcome to Stories from the Center of the Universe, the podcast about the human experience.
Dave, Lohr, welcome to the Center of the Universe.
Good morning, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to do this with you. I'm looking forward to it.
You and I just met over the phone. We were seeing each other's faces for the first time. And the reason you and I met is my neighbor, Bobby, we'll call him. That's his first name. I won't share his last name. Used to be neighbors with Jim, and you and Jim know each other somehow. And anyway, you and I connected.
Our wives used to work together. Jim
Okay.
and I's wives worked together at DuPont.
Oh, got it. Okay. That makes a ton of sense. And so we connected in the spirit of trying to help my son land a job post-graduation. He graduates here in May from Virginia Tech. And you two have the same major. He's about to realize his major in chemical engineering, and that's what you majored in as well. And so who better to talk to than somebody with a degree from the same institution? And you also, and we'll talk more about this, you also were an adjunct professor at the same institution, Virginia Tech. And so we're going to talk a lot about Virginia Tech. I'm now a fan of Virginia Tech. I say that begrudgingly since I didn't go there, and I may have gone to the rival. Not so much a rival these days in football. It hasn't been 3 decades almost since UVA football was relevant in that rivalry.
It certainly dates back to when we moved to Virginia in 2000. That was the start of the run.
It's wild, completely wild. Yeah, so I'm glad Bobby was thinking about my son. I'm glad Jim was kind enough to connect you and me, and you were kind enough to talk to my son and give him some great advice. So many thanks for all that.
Quite welcome.
All right, so we were just talking about IndyCar. I just randomly brought it up, and what was your response when I brought up IndyCar?
So it turns out I'm pretty much of a sports nut, and I have my favorites, and one of the more unique ones is that Memorial Day weekend, I'll be attending my 28th consecutive Indy 500 race over Memorial Day weekend.
And so you just love going to that one particular event. Do you track IndyCar throughout the rest of the season?
I do track it just to see which drivers are really performing well. And occasionally I'll watch one of those on TV. But this is one of those events that everybody should do one time. It's 350,000 people. It's a 2.5 mile oval. They go by your seat every 43 seconds. Then I give you some idea how quick they're going, 225, 228, something like that. And we started going when we lived in Cincinnati, which is like 2 hours from the track. And when we ultimately moved to Virginia, we are no longer 2 hours from the track, but we decided to keep doing it. The kids enjoyed it. Our former neighbors, they still go every year, so we see them. So it's part tradition, part social event, and I would be remiss if I didn't articulate this a bit. It's one of the most patriotic days you'll experience in your life. That it's all about the military and their service, and the traditions there are pretty incredible, what they do for the military. And that's probably the part of it I like the best, besides the fact that a race breaks out right after that.
Yeah, it's a big, obviously a big weekend in this country. NASCAR, I think they're in Charlotte that same day.
Yep, they are.
Yeah, and you get one or two racers, at least recently, that will try to do both, participate in both races, which is.
I think Kyle Larson may try it this year. I'm hearing that he may be a candidate for that.
That's wild.
But I will tell you, it's probably my favorite of all the 28 races. I was listening on the radio, and this phenom called Danica Patrick had the lead with 10 laps to go. And she was driving away from him, basically. She was out in front, clear air, don't hit the wall, blah, blah, blah. And you're probably going to win the race, right? And then with 4 laps to go, she got a message from the pit crew. You don't have enough fuel to make it all the way at full speed. I can't repeat for you what she said to them, but it was a string of expletives deleted. But she did slow down and ended up finishing 4th, which is the highest finishing female at the Indy 500. She did ultimately win a race in the IndyCar Racing League, but never got that Indy victory. And everybody wonders, was there enough gas or not? And the question is, if you were her and that's what they told you and you thought you could win Indy, what would you do? I'd probably keep rolling. But, I mean, they talked her into being a part of history, and that's how it ended. So that's probably the coolest one we've seen.
I would have kept rolling. There's no question I would have kept rolling, Dave. No question.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to get to the spot of being in front with 10 to go. I mean, it's a lot different than NASCAR in the sense that you can, if you bump anything, you're pretty much done. And so you got all these cars flying around at 225 miles an hour. And sometimes they're too wide. If they get 3 wide, somebody is not going to be in the race when that ends because somebody's going to hit a wall or something,
Yeah, I think the logic for just keeping the gas pedal to the floor is, I'll quote Ricky Bobby from Talladega Nights: if you're not first, you're last. So whether you come in 4th or 22nd, who cares? You didn't win.
Only way to get your picture on next year's ticket is to win the race. And
you say
I have all the tickets. Yes, and they are collector's items, and the owners of Indy, which now it turns out is Roger Penske, he's made it very clear to the fan base that he understands the tickets are collector's items. If you want electronic tickets, you can call the ticket office and give them your number and say, here, I'll just take them on my phone from here on. But very, very few people do that because it's tradition that goes back as far as I've been going and way back beyond that, where whoever wins last year, they end up on the ticket for this year. So ends up pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool thing.
That's a great tradition. All right, Dave, let's back up to the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in Cumberland, Maryland, which is in the extreme western part of the state. And you could drive from West Virginia through Cumberland and into Pennsylvania in about 15 or 20 minutes. So it's that little narrow spot out there. When I was growing up, it was what I would call a blue-collar manufacturing city. It was vibrant. We had 4 big factories. One made sheet glass, one made automobile and small truck tires, one made munitions for the U.S. Navy, and one made acrylic fiber. My dad happened to work at the tire plant, and that's where his career was. So we grew up in a pretty classic blue collar family, and my dad was obsessed with getting his kids more education than he was able to get. And so if you knew my dad at all, the one thing you knew about him is you could get away with a lot of stuff growing up, but if you did anything that he thought would have been a detriment to your education and getting to college and achieving that degree, the hammer would come down fast and swift. Yes, I learned that quickly. But I became the first member of my father's family to go to a university. And of course, I went to Virginia Tech, and I spent 5 years there total studying chemical engineering. And I integrated into the program the work study co-op program that many students use, because My parents said, we'll pay the first 2 years and you can get enough loans that we can get you. And then after that, we got to turn over to your sisters and help them. So you're good for the first 2, but the second 2, they're on you. And so I had an interesting life learning of what it means to have the ball and to have to make decisions about how do you spend your money, because you know what the tuition's bill's going to be, and you gotta have it or you're not done. So, and I would give a shout out here. I'm positive neither one of these guys is still alive, but when I was at Virginia Tech, there was a gentleman named Jim Godfrey who ran the co-op program. And Jim also was the one that handled several of the engineering departments, including chemical. So he was my guy, right? So he got me hooked up with an interview across winter break or Christmas break, what would have been my freshman year. And I went out to Ashland, Ohio, or Columbus, I should say, to the Ashland corporate headquarters, interviewed out there. Turns out they had 2 VT co-ops interview, me and another kid, another guy whose name, by the way, is Joel. I have since met him and become a colleague of his, but they couldn't decide between us, so they gave it to the hometown kid. And that was not good news for this guy right here, because I had to have a job. But as it turns out, when I get back from that Christmas break, I went by my real mailbox that we had back in those days, and there was one piece of mail in there. It was a postcard from Jim Godfrey, and it said, "Come see me as soon as you get back." This would have been January. "You start co-oping at a DuPont facility in South Carolina, September the 1st, if you want that job." Sight unseen, as far as them seeing me. It turns out the director of the program for co-ops at that site, Howard Evans, was one of Jim's best friends. And he knew I needed it. And he called his buddy on my behalf and said, "Hey, I got a strong student here that desperately needs a co-op. Any chance you can fit him in? And hopefully he would be a good co-op student while he's there, and we can reestablish the program between Virginia Tech and that site." So that's what happened. And, it's pretty typical these days that some kind of networking or some kind of a personal phone call seems to drive the bus. But I left Virginia Tech and went to work for DuPont. And I spent almost 20 years at DuPont. And my time there involved multiple sites and multiple types of job. Did several jobs in what would be, plant technical assistance. Did one really cool job in just basic organic chemicals research using a small pilot plant to prove out some things. That was super fun. And then I moved over to the business side for a while and helped to run some of DuPont's portfolio, especially chemicals. And then my last segment with DuPont was probably the most fascinating one I've ever done. Our senior vice president, Jack Breckenridge, put a small group of us together. There were about 6 of us, including a lawyer. And he put us on a special assignment. Go find $100 million potential new businesses that fit my portfolio, because I can't grow fast enough for the 9th floor, which is where DuPont's CEO hung out. I can't grow fast enough selling them another tank car or another barrel full. We need some new businesses. And so I got into that group, and over the course of a few years in there, we found an opportunity to apply biodegradable polymers and a family of them for which we made one of the key precursors of glycolic acid. Anyway, we created a joint venture with a company in Cincinnati to to do that. And we ended up, and I can say this now, I think my confidentiality agreements are long since expired, but we worked with a bunch of big pharma companies, including Johnson & Johnson and their Janssen division based over in Belgium. And we were able to put that technology into their drug for schizophrenia called Risperdal. And they got better animal data than they'd ever seen. And then they put it in humans, and it was magnificent. And then it became obvious that they were going to run this project as hard and as fast as they could. And my company had a choice to make. Do we roll, and do we get the funds we need to grow and roll with this thing, or do we sell it? And the owners ended up deciding that the $100 million it would take to keep up was more than they wanted to invest, and so they sold it. And that was the end of that experience. But that drug, Risperdal Consta, went on to be a blockbuster for Johnson & Johnson, sold more than $5 billion worth of it. And it works just like the pill, except it keeps the patient compliant. You get a shot every month, and the drug works for a month, and you can stay a compliant individual in society for a very, very long time. So that was pretty cool.
I didn't realize.
What's that?
I didn't realize schizophrenia was that prevalent to lead to $5 billion in sales.
Well, this dose form was not cheap. I don't know what exactly J&J was going to sell it for, but probably all in it cost us, and this does not include their drug. They would give us the drug to use, but we were looking at probably maybe $100 a dose kind of number in this system. Yeah. Wow. And that doesn't include the drug, by the way. So, you add on top, that was just the delivery mechanism. But the compliance piece was huge. People in families or just people that have good friends would jump all over it because their loved one or their close friend, whatever, could become about as normal a person as someone with schizophrenia could become. And so it was a game changer. And it really was really cool to be involved on the front end of that and to see that develop. And my recommendation, by the way, to my board and my owners was get the cash and let's roll with this thing, because this drug is going to work. I had seen the data. I knew it was going to work, Yeah. But sometimes owners, they have different agendas or they have different priorities. And I get it was a lot of money, but we got 5% of gross revenue. So you can do 5% of $4 billion, figure that out in your head real quick. And we were going to make it for them at cost plus 10%. Pretty good deal for us, actually, that we negotiated.
Really good deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right, cool. I want to go back to your childhood. What kind of kid were you when you were like 9 or 10 years old? What were you getting into?
So when I was that age range, I was going to parochial school. So, I was trying to avoid as many disciplinary activities with the nuns as I could. I wasn't horrible, but I did have a tendency to get a little bit in trouble sometimes in school. I think maybe I just got bored. I'm not really sure, but I played Little League and hot stove baseball. I played in a church basketball league. My athletic ability is not the greatest, but good enough to be a role player and have some fun with those things. And so sporting wise, that's the kind of stuff I did. And I had a group of about half a dozen guys in my neighborhood that we hung out with and are actually all still in touch with each other, even all these years past. But one of them had a pool table in his basement. And so we spent a lot of time playing pool and hanging out, doing things like that. Then as I moved into high school, got a little further into the teens, the sporting participation side of my game went away, but I did still stay involved in the sports. I joined the high school newspaper as a sports writer, and then I became sports editor, and that was a bunch. That was fun, interviewing the athletes and creating the stories and all that kind of stuff. Had a blast doing that. And at one point in my life, actually, I thought my career calling was to be a journalist, a sports writer, right? And my dad said, absolutely not. You will be an engineer. You're way too smart to be a sports writer. So there you go. And it turns out he was right, because, with what's happened to newspapers and other traditional forms of conveying information, I would have been unemployed way earlier in my career, I think, probably. But high school was good. And I had some really good teachers who helped me sort out this idea. Okay, if you're going to be an engineer, what does that mean? And what are the options? And I really wanted to go to Penn State because they had good football, but they were really expensive. And it turns out Virginia Tech had a great co-op program, and even for out-of-state students, their tuition, room, and board was cheaper than had I gone in-state to the University of Maryland. So I ended up being a Hokie, and that probably was the best possible decision that I could have made in retrospect. And
yeah, you did not go there for their football team at the time, because they were pretty bad back then. Right?
Yeah, they were pretty bad. One of the games when I was there, they played Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and I believe the final score was 77-7. Needless to say, I didn't do that road trip. I knew what was going to happen. But football was not that big a deal. I mean, the stadium was half the size it is now. And as a student, you just show your ID card and you go in and sit and stay as long as you want and come back out. And it was just not anywhere near what it was. The sport when I was there was men's basketball. They were really good. In fact, I believe it was 1975. I think that's the right year. They were so good. They got an invitation to the NIT, which back then was really prestigious. And they went on to win the NIT, beating Notre Dame on a last-second shot by guard Bobby Stevens. So that was pretty cool to see that. And we packed the castle back then. The men were really, really good. And we didn't have women's basketball. So, but I went there for engineering and co-op. Everything else was just kind of a bonus or gravy, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
All right. I have lots of questions about the things you said the last few minutes. Let's start with, why do you love sports so much?
So it's interesting. I grew up in a neighborhood, a nice neighborhood, where there were a lot of guys that I hung out with. And I think, we all liked basketball. We had a couple of playgrounds in the neighborhood where they had, baskets set up with the chain link net. So nothing but chain instead of nothing but nylon, right? And we spent a lot of time playing basketball. And my father was a huge Pittsburgh Pirates fan. And so over the course of my teen years, I had the opportunity to do, I would guess, at least a half a dozen, maybe more, Pirate games at the old Forbes Field in Pittsburgh with my dad. That was pretty cool. And then my hometown, and this just ended last year after, 60 or 70 year run, something like that. My hometown used to host what they called the Alhambra Catholic Invitational Basketball Tournament. And they would invite 7 of the best Catholic high school basketball teams in, kind of the Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, Chicago. I think we've had a team one year from Canada. And they would come, and then our Catholic high school, Bishop Walsh, which I did not go to, but it was there. They hosted it, and there were 3 days full of games, and everybody played every day. So when you came, you played all 3 days. There was a consolation round. Obviously, somebody would lose all three, but somebody would win all three too. So, and I went to that every year. It was awesome. And some of those players went on to be stars in college, and even a couple made it to the pros. But I think the combination of my kids in the neighborhood being kind of let's go shoot hoops, right? That's what we did, and then going with my dad to the games, and then certainly the Alhambra. When that was going on, they'd take me over there in the afternoon when it started, and they'd drop me off. No cell phone, no nothing. I guess they gave me some money. I don't even know about that, but I would stay for 4 games, and then they would pick me up, and they would be listening on the radio, so they would know when it's getting time, and we had a pickup spot, and then I'd walk back to the pickup spot, and they'd take me home, and they'd bring me back the next day. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, Catholic high schools, and I've lived in the Richmond area most of my life. Benedictine high school most years is a nationally competitive high school basketball team, and I'm guessing they went to that Alhambra.
They went there for sure. Out of DC, DeMatha was a regular. Roanoke Catholic, believe it or not, made several appearances there. And then out of Philadelphia, Cardinal O'Hara, and quite a few of the Philly schools, but O'Hara seemed to be the one that would be most competitive. And I forget the school. That came out of Chicago. I don't remember what that school name was, but you get those schools out of Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, Chicago. That's big time basketball back in those days. Those teams were really good and really competitive. My hometown team that hosted it almost always lost all 3 games. I mean, it wasn't even close, right? So, but it was great for the community. And unfortunately, it died away last year. And,
really?
Yep. And it became a victim of, I think, 2 things. One, the emphasis now that is placed on state high school basketball championships, and the fact that, the parochial schools can now play in that too, right? They weren't allowed to do that back in the day. Now they are. So they're all playing in playoff tournaments. And then secondarily, you can imagine the amount of volunteer labor it takes to do this tournament, right? And now all the factories except the munition plant are gone. And so are probably at least 20,000 people that lived there when I was there at the peak. The population is down probably from 50-some thousand down into the high 20s. Wow. So you just don't have the body of people. This was a community-long week. Everybody was involved. Yeah, but I think that's what got me going on sports, and I just kind of went from there.
I will say the best sport for my money is basketball. It requires so much of the athletes. You can take a billion different approaches to the game. It's a fascinating sport, and it's constant motion, which is, to my eye, really appealing to watch or participate in.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would have to say, if you said to me, okay, rank your sports in the order of priority, basketball would be absolutely number 1. Probably Indy number 2, believe it or not. That weekend is just amazing. I mean, this is 28 times now, and I will still leave there moved by the power of the weekend. It's just incredible. And then after that, I would probably say Virginia Tech sports, football, basketball. And then after that, probably I would say golf, and also Carolina Hurricanes hockey. I do a few games of hockey every year with our daughter. So that would kind of be the pecking order, but basketball number one. And when we chatted on the phone before this interview, I mentioned to you that I have quite a history with March Madness. And this coming week, starting on Thursday, I will be at Rupp Arena with my wife and some friends, and we will be watching games in round 1 and 2 of the men's tournament. We'll have 4 games on Thursday and then 2 more on Saturday. And then on Friday and Sunday, we have this other activity planned, and that's called the Bourbon Trail. So we got this pretty well lined up. Bourbon and basketball, it sort of goes together, right?
Well, so all those games, the 6 games you're going to watch at Rupp Arena is going to take you 2 or just above what number of games?
So the second game I see this weekend, which is actually going to be Auburn versus a play-in team, either Alabama State or St. Francis, will be the 200th game that I have seen live in the tournament. And I'll see 4 more games after that. So I'll be at 204 after this weekend.
Dave, outside of people that are part of these college basketball programs for decades, outside of people in the NCAA, you've got to be in the top 5 or 10 people that have seen the most games.
I'm up there, that's for sure. And part of the fun of going to the tournament is interacting with the fans because, in between sessions, you go to bars, and on the in-between days, you're out doing things and you run into fans all over the place. And, inevitably, you'll run into some folks and they're tournament junkies too. But I haven't found anyone yet, and I haven't interviewed the whole U.S., okay, but I haven't found anyone yet that's anywhere close to where I am. This started in 1978.
Wow.
And the very first game I saw actually was a game that Michigan State played against Western Kentucky at the Dayton Arena. And Michigan State had this sophomore guard that you might have heard of, but at the time, nobody had. And his name was Irvin Magic Johnson. And I watched him play that one game, and I knew I'd never seen anybody play basketball like that before. But that's where it started. And since that time, we have gone to the tournament 40 times across 28, let me see, I wrote this down, 23 different venues, 40 trips, 28 opening round sessions, 8 regional sessions, and 4 Final Four sessions.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
Final Four has to be up there with the Indy 500.
It is. It's pretty cool. Unfortunately, they do them in domes. So it's hard to get a good seat. They reserve all the courtside seats for the teams that are playing. So the best you can do down low is be behind a basket. So typically in the arenas like that, they have a second deck, and that's typically where you get. So if you get a good seat up there where you can see, it's pretty cool. We've been lucky. All the Final Fours we saw were good games. I saw Michael Jordan hit the winner.
You were there for that?
Yep, I was there. Yeah.
This 3 years earlier, he couldn't make his high school basketball team.
I know. Well, he was not the best player on that team, by the way. They had some other guys on there. You might have heard this guy named James Worthy and Brad Daugherty and a couple of those guys that played with him. Those guys could play. But on the other side of the equation, it was Georgetown, okay, and John Thompson, and he had some players too. And
Yeah, Ewing was on that team, right?
Yeah. But it was cool to see Michael. He did what he did for all those years in the NBA. He just went down there and Dranoed it. And then we saw another game. That was in the Superdome in Atlanta. We saw another game in Atlanta that, not Atlanta, Superdome in New Orleans. Yeah. We saw another one in New Orleans in '87. And that was a memorable one for sure. The championship game was Indiana and Syracuse. Bobby Knight versus Jim Boeheim, right? And growing up, we did this all the time at the playground. Game is on the line, 3, 2, 1, shoot the shot, hit it, you win. You don't, you lose. Well, that was this. They got Keith Smart isolated for a baseline jumper. They were down 1, didn't touch a thing. Perfect shot. And then time expired and Indiana pretty much stole a victory there, I guess. But the other cool thing about that tournament, and I have all these facts documented, some I can remember, some I have to look up, but Bobby Knight could be a bit of a volatile coach at times. And back then they had phones at the scorer's table that were the old style phone you had in your house that sat on the desk somewhere, right? And he got mad at some call somebody made, and he picked that phone up and threw it down and broke it into like 8 or 10 pieces. I mean, he just chucked that thing. And of course, he got a technical foul, right? For sure. But that's not the hilarious part. The hilarious part is you come back for the Monday night game, right? For all the marbles. And you look at the scorer's table, and on the end of the scorer's table, there was a little girl like pink plastic telephone right next to his seat. He was not happy when he saw that. I'm telling you, he wasn't. But that was pretty cool. And
hey, Dave, hold on. You were there in person for the 2 most iconic shots in the '80s.
Yeah. Just lucky. I mean, wow. It used to be easier to get tickets to the Final Four than it is now. It's so popular; it's really hard to get them. But and we saw Georgetown with Michael Graham and of course John Thompson beat Phi Slamma Jamma Houston up in Seattle in what was then the Kingdome. It's not even there anymore. Yeah. And then we saw Louisville win in Atlanta in the previous dome in Atlanta. I think it was called the Mercedes-Benz Dome or whatever it's called. But anyway, we saw that game too. And that was the year that Louisville beat Michigan. And it marked a milestone for Rick Pitino. He became one of the first coaches to ever win the Natty for 2 different schools, because he coached at Kentucky and won it. And then he went to Louisville and won it. So that's kind of a bit of trivia from that particular one.
Yeah, and he's still going at it, right?
He is still going at it. And I'm telling you, he has a good team. He really does. So out of all those games and all that stuff, let's see what else we've seen. And this is up to date through this weekend, because I already know what this weekend, what we got. But I've seen 198 different coaches. We have some interesting data. The most games coached that we have seen by one person, that belongs to a guy you might know, Coach K. We saw him 11 times in the tournament, and his record was 14-4.
Yeah,
that's not too bad, if you know what I mean.
They've been unbelievable since the mid '80s, late '80s.
Yeah. But here's the really interesting one, and it's never gotten me anything of value, but it should. We've seen North Carolina, who would not be my favorite team. We have seen North Carolina 14 times I mean, 14 games in the tournament.
Wow.
And they have never lost when I'm in the house.
You're not seeing them this year, are you?
No. They don't belong in there, quite honestly, but no, we're not seeing them. No.
Anybody that is objective knows and believes they should not be in the tournament this year, but there's something to their brand that obviously got them over the line.
Bubba Cunningham is the chairman of the selection committee. He's their athletic director. Now, he's not in the room when they debate North Carolina, but seriously.
He's not physically in the room, but he's having an impact. I know.
Yeah, his shadow is big in the room, right? So I don't know. But let's see if there's anything else. There's a couple other cool things that I can tell you about the tournament. I can talk about it forever because I've been to so many. But we have seen 6 what I call big time upsets where 13 seed, 14 seed, 15 seed wins their opening round game. And we've seen that happen 6 times.
Wow.
They aren't real. They don't happen that much up in that area. And of course, obviously 1 versus 16 hardly ever happens, but we've never seen one of those. Another little piece of trivia, in 2019, we went to games in Jacksonville, Florida. And we just went there because we'd never been to games there. And we ended up drawing Wofford. And Wofford won their first game and then gave Kentucky all they wanted, but they couldn't quite get over the hump. Turns out that was the last game that Coach Mike Young coached for Wofford before he was introduced as the new head basketball coach at Virginia Tech. So that's kind of interesting. I'm sitting there watching Wofford and wondering who we're going to hire because we already fired our guy, right? So I'm thinking, who's it going to be, right? And Mike Young was not on that list, I can tell you, but pretty interesting. And then I saved kind of what I consider the best for last. This was back all the way in 1996, and we went to opening round games at what was then called the RCA Dome, which has since been imploded, and they built a new stadium for the Colts, right? So they don't have that anymore. But we saw a game between 13th ranked Princeton and the mighty defending national champion UCLA Bruins. Okay. And at the time, former legendary Bruins player Reggie Miller was in Indianapolis playing for the Indiana Pacers. And so for the particular session where UCLA played, Reggie is down in the center of the stands, down low, right along the court side. And he's got an entourage of at least 50 people, could have been more, I don't know, huge entourage, right? And UCLA comes out and they look so athletic and so svelte. And you're sitting here going, this is, by the way, the 10-10 tip-off. So we're like, okay, we'll just leave at halftime. You know, this is going to be a blowout. We're going to be out of here because we had to drive home. But anyway, Princeton comes out and it looks like Halloween. So they got these black warm-ups on, and then they got pants with orange and white vertical stripes on them. They looked, it's like, where did you guys come from, right? But anyway, during the first half, the game stayed very close. And I think, if I remember correctly, Princeton might have been up by 2 at the half, something that was really close. Anyway, nobody leaves. There were 33,000 people there. And beginning after halftime, with the exception of that 50 to 100 people down there with Reggie, 32,000 people were raucously cheering for Princeton. And by the way, this was Pete Carrill's last game as their coach if they lost. Okay? Well, you can probably tell where this is going. They won 43-41. And those players, they just were in a different zone that day. And they never played. I bet they didn't play in front of 33,000 people all year long in aggregate, right? But that crowd got into it. And Princeton was just working the ball, weaving it all around, using 30 seconds every time. And they just frustrated UCLA. And then they pull out the win. And I'll never forget, they showed it on the big board up high. At the end, Pete Carell, who was famous for holding a towel, sort of like John Thompson does, he had this towel and he literally buried his head in it. And you could tell, he was crying his eyes out, man. Yeah. And the next day in the second round game, they got blown out. But in what would have been his last game, he beat the defending national champion. And that was amazing to watch.
Yeah, I had to remind myself there was a shot clock back then, right? It was the same amount of seconds that we have today in today's game. Yeah. And they seem to score 40 of the 43 points on backdoor cuts.
That's what they were doing. That's all they were doing. They were shooting layups. They very rarely did anything but a layup. And I couldn't believe UCLA couldn't figure it out. But I concluded that UCLA probably did figure it out, but Princeton executed it so perfectly that you couldn't stop it. And but that was a very cool night. And the game was over right around midnight. And honestly, nobody left. It's crazy, but nobody left. You could feel it in the air. You know what I'm saying? You knew Cinderella was in the house. You knew. And that's probably the most memorable, I would call it, game that we've seen. We've seen a bunch, but that one's right up there,
And that was one of the 6 games where a 13, 14, or 15 seed won the game.
Yep, because that's right. That's correct, because they were the 13 seed. So that was one of the 6. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like every year a 12 seed or 2 12 seeds or sometimes 3 12 seeds win the first round game. But it's pretty unusual for 13 and beyond to win a first round game.
It is. Those 13 through 16. We haven't seen a 16, but we've seen 13, 14, and 15 each at least once. Those teams are usually champions from the small leagues, Ivy League or the Northeast Conference, or all the small leagues where basketball is played with a lot less athletic players than perhaps at the Blue Bloods. And it's interesting to watch. They got nothing to lose. So in that sense, everybody expects they're going to lose, right? You show up and everybody knows, okay, you're going to lose, right? But if they can establish themselves early and get a little bit of a lead and demonstrate to themselves that, you know what, we could win this game. We have a shot. But like I said, it doesn't happen very often, we've seen a ton of upsets, but I don't consider 9 beating 8 truly an upset. But we've seen a lot of upsets. But those higher seeds are not. I would say from 10 down is pretty common, quite honestly. It's those higher ones that don't. Yeah.
Well, there's something about a double-digit seed beating a single-digit seed.
Yeah, those are the best games. And we pick a destination, and then, like I told you on the phone, I'm kind of in the basketball analogy of a Swiftie, right? I get early access to all the tickets. I get an email from the NCAA back in October of the prior year, and I get a special code that allows me to get in before the rest of the universe gets in. When the window opens, I'm sitting right there. I've already got it open. I just got to refresh it and pick the seats and be done. But we've already selected where we're going to go when that all transpires. And we look at the sites and, decide, okay, where do we want to go this year? We chose Rupp Arena, which, by the way, is the number one destination for us. This will be our 5th time seeing games at Rupp, but we did live in Cincinnati for 8 years, and it's like, I don't know, an hour and a half. So whenever they had games there when we were in Cincinnati, we'd go. Have been there for quite a while. It'd be interesting to see what it looks like, but we've been there 5 times as a venue, and but the Bourbon Trail and going back to Rupp kind of peaked us this year in terms of our.
That's a great long weekend, Dave.
It will be, yeah.
And I'm guessing the Monday before the tournament starts tomorrow for the playing games, you're probably as excited now as you are all year long.
Yeah, I am. I'm excited to look at the bracket. I'm not very good at playing brackets because I watch so much basketball and I stay so close to it throughout the season that what happens is I know too much in a way. And so somebody that knows a whole lot less about it and just kind of goes in there and goes, okay, I don't know, I like those guys. I'll pick those guys. And they pick a few upsets. And then the next thing you know, they got it, you know?
The person who wins every bracket I've ever participated in literally has watched less than one full basketball game.
Yeah. And I don't know how many I've watched this year. I have no idea. I don't know.
Right. Well, since you watch so much, is there another team besides Duke that's going to win the whole thing? Duke looks unbeatable.
Yeah, I want to see Flag play without limitation this weekend in that first game. But if he is healthy, I think they got the bullseye on their back. And the fact that they won 2 games in the ACC tournament, well, really 3 actually, without him and without Malik Brown, their other star player. And Brown's not going to play, I don't think, at all for the rest of the year. I think he's got a badly separated shoulder is what I hear. But with Flag, Duke is tough. And it'll be interesting to see if anybody can get them. They already beat Auburn. They played them, I think, in the ACC, SEC champion, or what do you call it? Crossover.
I think they call it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we know they can beat Auburn. And so I don't know. I, to be honest with you, and I haven't seen them play a lot, maybe a little bit of some highlights, but of the other 3 number 1 seeds, I think the most dangerous one is Florida. They are playing really good basketball right now. They just won the SEC tournament. They beat Tennessee. They beat Auburn. I don't know who all they beat. I think that they are a real serious contender. And then people are ignoring St. John and Rick Pitino. And I think that's a bad move. I'm not sure he's got enough horsepower on that team to make it to the Final Four, but he's going to win some games. They are definitely going to win some games. They have got a great shooting guard who was Big East Player of the Year. They got a big guy, and his name is Zuby, and he could physically compete with the big guys that Duke has. Now, whether or not he's as talented as they are, I don't know that I would say that, but he could potentially give them enough strength in the paint to make a game of it. So we'll see how that goes. But
because you watched so much basketball for so long, St. John's was amazing back when the Big East was relevant and they would just beat each other up twice a week, every week for the season. I mean, that was the most compelling basketball I've watched in my lifetime. And I'm an old school ACC guy. I'm an original ACC guy. But wow, they went to obscurity for what, a couple of decades.
Well, they never successfully replaced Louis Carnesecca.
Yeah,
he retired like they all do at some point, right? And for whatever reason, they have gone through, and I don't even know how many They went through probably half a dozen or more coaches. And, every once in a while they'd have a good season, but they couldn't restore the glory. And when I saw they hired Pitino, I thought, well, if he stays, you guys are gonna win that Big East. There's no doubt you're gonna win it if he stays. And it just took him 2 years. That's not bad. And it's good to see in basketball schools like St. John and Creighton and some of the other really top teams in the Big East. They are football agnostic. They don't have it for the most part, right? They don't have it. I think Connecticut may have it, but that's it. But their number one focus for all those schools is basketball. It's their football. And so they really have a good and deep league. Villanova's a little off right now, but they just fired their coach. So we'll hopefully they're having the same problem everybody does, right? Jay Wright retired. And how do you replace a legend like him? Won some natties. I mean, it's really hard to do that. And right now the ACC is suffering from that. They've had 8 Hall of Fame coaches retire since Coach K started the movement. 8 Hall of Fame guys retire.
Yeah, it's wild.
You just don't replace those guys overnight. Now, you're seeing that Shire, who was handpicked by Kay and sat with him for a year and learned everything, is doing good. But it's tough to replace a legend. Syracuse is struggling, right? I mean, Hubert Davis, I don't know if he survives at North Carolina or not. I mean, they shouldn't have been in, but they're in. But
he's going to have to make it to the Sweet 16, right?
Yeah, I mean, Duke handled them 3 times. Even and the third time, they didn't even have Cooper Flagg, and they still handled them. So that tells you how far behind where Duke is they are. And so, I mean, they got the same problem. They had trouble replacing Dean Smith. Took forever, right? And then they got Roy Williams, and he had a good run. And then here we are again. Those are tough jobs to fill. And you just got to get lucky, or you got to really, really think about what you're doing and how you're going to replace a guy, those type coaches. But I do think the ACC will upgrade its coaching. And I think they got the message. They got to deal with a better distribution of NIL money for basketball, or they're going to be an also ran kind of conference compared to the other guys. But I think they're going to come out of this year with a kind of a stark revelation that we aren't where we need to be. We got to hire better coaches. We got to pay better. We got to get better players. We got to get the NIL working better so that we can get back to where we are. I think there's absolutely no doubt that these schools with the money and the right coaches can be every bit as good as the other 3 leagues that comprise the Power 4. There's no reason that they can't, but it's money and then finding a way to replace those legends that have retired from the game. And it's tough. And Jim Phillips, the commissioner, said that, by the way, during the ACC tournament. He said the same thing, basically, that replacing those coaches is a real challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a UVA guy, and when I was not happy to see Tony Bennett retire, even though he retired after a brutal season the year before where they were playing 10 seed. I think they were 10 seed, and I think they didn't score for like 11 minutes of the game clock. Yeah. But anyway, I bring UVA up because he's still a pretty young guy. He might show up somewhere else, and he would do good for whatever program he goes to next. But he's the first coach to lose to a 16 seed, and then the next year win the national championship.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy?
And then it's even crazier. The UMBC coach, who then went to Utah State and is now at VCU, and they won the A-10, he's interviewing with us. I don't know how widely known that is, but he's interviewing for us. And I think we should
It's
hire
out there.
him.
It's out there.
I think we should hire him.
Yeah.
What an irony if he ends up being the UVA head coach.
Right. Well, based on what he's done at VCU, you got to believe that he could translate that to Virginia, right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't see any reason at all. And quite honestly, I don't see any reason that Virginia can't be economically competitive. I understand, and you might know about this, I don't, but I heard from some friends of mine that somebody who is part of the meteoric successful company Reddit gave a big chunk of money to Virginia athletics, a big chunk. Yeah.
Wow.
I heard a number on the order of like 20 million or something like that. A big number.
Yeah, that's
the person that said it wasn't sure, but they were trying to give me what they heard was the order of magnitude of this gift.
Wow.
And there's only ever been 2 gifts in the history of Virginia Tech for any reason in excess of 20 million. And both of those were for engineering academic buildings for whom the donor actually got naming rights. So one was a 25 million by Bill Goodwin, who you might have heard of. And the other was by a couple named Norris. And they gave 35 million, and there's a new building going to be called it's going to be called Mitchell. His name is Norris Mitchell, I think is the right name. But that's it. So
yeah,
we're not expecting that kind of gift for athletics, but it shows that you guys do have some horsepower that you can tap. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what they do with all that money. Their non-football, non-basketball programs are like nationally competitive. Most of those sports they've won national championships multiple times in some cases. But them winning the national championship of basketball, I still can't believe they did that. I never thought I'd live to see it.
Yeah, well, I didn't either. Hey, sometimes you get on a run and it happens,
Yeah, just whoever can put 6 together, right, or 7.
Yeah.
All right. So, any regrets, Dave, not being a sports journalist as a career?
I would say not. And hindsight is always great, but I thoroughly have enjoyed the career that chemical engineering allowed me to have. Midway through that career, after being involved with the company that did the drug delivery polymeric system, I went back to Xavier University and decided, might be a good idea to get an MBA so I know what I'm supposed to do running these companies, because I had tons of management training at DuPont, but I didn't have an MBA. I did not. And so I went back to Xavier and got my MBA. And that was interesting to do at the midpoint of a career, to go back and knock the dust off and say, okay, can I do this again or not? And but I really got a lot out of that. That was a very, very valuable thing. And I'm very fortunate to have had a career where, I worked for a big company, DuPont, and I learned so much there, and had some great bosses, some great vice presidents that I worked with, including my best mentor of my career there, Jack Breckenridge, tremendous guy. Just knew how to do it, man. He knew how to do it. And then, I got into a group that was looking for new businesses for Mr. Breckenridge's division. And we were looking for things that we could create, partner, joint venture, acquire, whatever, that had the potential to generate $100 million in revenue within 5 years. Pretty blank sheet of paper, by the way. And the drug company came out of that. And then I left to run that. And then when that was over, I got involved in an industry that I didn't even know existed at the time. And that is the so-called business incubation industry, where People set up facilities with office space, sometimes with labs, depending on the kind of companies they're hoping to attract. And then with lots of support mechanisms, advisors, mentors, all kinds of things that are designed to help entrepreneurs avoid the big mistakes and give themselves the best possible chance at starting a successful company. And I ended up doing that in Cincinnati and then again in Richmond and at the Biotech Park. And that was a really satisfying run in my career. And then after about 12 years or 12 or 13 years of doing the incubation scene, then I had another one of those networking moments where over the course of a week, 3 different people who are close friends of mine send me this job posting thing for the founding president and executive director of the Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing down there near you in Prince George, right?
Yep.
And after the third guy sent me a message saying, I think you'd be great for this. I wasn't seeing it. I couldn't see it. So I called him up and said, hey, Bob, I'm going to buy you a Starbucks at the Starbucks near our house where we meet periodically. You pick the day next week. I'm going to buy you a Starbucks and you got 45 minutes because I got to get to work. You got 45 minutes to help me understand why all you guys think this is such a great fit for me. Because I thought it was an awesome opportunity, but I did not look like the Cinderella for this one, for sure. But what Bob was able to do is to help me understand that what they were asking for in this job did not exist. You were never going to find somebody that had all these attributes. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack. And the reality is, knowing what the role had to do in the first few years, okay, versus long term, I had those skills. And I'd done a lot of work with universities over my time. So I was very comfortable working on university stuff, et cetera, right? And so I threw my name in a hat and got through the process, got an in-person interview, and actually got hired. And I spent a couple of years doing that, and gave me a chance to do something completely different, build a very successful public-private partnership, do some good for the companies that were involved in it, create a lot of really nice high-paying jobs in the region, all those kind of things. But I also had some really unique opportunities in there, one of which I treasure a lot. I went to the Paris Air Show representing our entity. And when I got over there, I got a message that the governor was coming. Okay, that would have been Governor Bob McDonnell. And he wants to see you when he gets to the show. And I said, okay, I'm here. I'm at the booth. Go ahead, whatever. So anyway, governor comes in. We introduce him to everybody at the booth. And he asked me to take him on a little bit of a walking tour through the exhibit hall, which I did. And I'm not a trained politician. You know what I'm saying? This is not something that I trained for. This is something I found out about maybe 8 hours before it actually happened. I think he was already on the plane over there. So anyway, we're done with the walkthrough. He said, so would you mind returning to the, when it's time to leave, would you mind riding with me so that you can give me a briefing on the 45 guests that are going to be at the dinner that I'm joining you to have tonight so that I can, promote Virginia. I'd like to know who I'm going to be visiting with. So I'm not taking the subway back. I'm going in the governor's car, right? And he had a few questions, not many. Mostly took a power nap is what he did. But anyway, here I am so far off the reservation. I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So I decided to just play it cool and say, Governor, let me know how I can help you to prepare for tonight. Whatever you want. You got some questions, ask me. But I'm going to kind of take your cue, okay? And he did want to know about a couple of people that he thought were going to be there, which I was able to handle. So then we get to the venue, and we're early. And I get there, and one of my board members was also there. He was one of the high-level executives at Rolls-Royce Aircraft Engines, right? He said, well, since CCAM is hosting this event and you're the leader of CCAM, you need to introduce the governor.
This is all spur of the moment.
Yeah. Like I'm in the building and this thing's going to start in an hour. I got to introduce the governor. I don't know if you know this or not, but there is very specific language that you have to use to do the introduction of the governor. And so what they wanted me to do was just say a few words about the governor, because I did know him a little bit, but just say a few words about him, the fact that he's married, has a couple of young men, has a couple of sons, just make him a human being kind of thing. And then do the, my pleasure to introduce to you the 45th, whatever he was, governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Honorable, gotta get that in there, the Honorable Robert McDonald. And
this is happening.
Here I am, this dude from a blue-collar town introducing the governor.
In Paris.
Huh?
In Paris.
In Paris, yeah, in Paris, right, yeah. So I think that's what tells me that I made a good career choice. And then the last part of my career has been spent as an adjunct faculty for 7 years in the business school, not the engineering school, in the business school at Virginia Tech, where I taught foundations of business for the freshmen, and then the core management course, that principles of management, it's called, that all the sophomores/juniors have to take regardless of their major. And I did that for about 7 years, and then decided that it was time to retire from that activity. And along with doing the teaching in the School of Business, I started a consulting company back in the beginning of 2014. I started a consulting company and have been doing a handful of consulting projects, mostly related to helping communities, cities, states, towns, economic development groups, folks like the Greater Richmond Partnership, for example. I mean, we haven't done anything with them, but that's typical kind of group we work with, to grow their economy through the development of technology and advanced manufacturing-based companies. And that's been fun. And I continue to do that and really enjoy that, working on a project for a client right now in a North Chicago suburb. I can't say what it is, but you give you an idea. We just finished a big project last year for a client in northeastern Pennsylvania, maybe near Lehigh University or something like that. We did a project for a community in the metropolitan regional area of Gainesville, Florida. So it was a town in that area. That one involved also the University of Florida. I'm trying to think what else we've done. We've done a bunch of projects. I can't remember them all, but that's what I'm doing now. And besides that, I'm now that I've stopped teaching and whatnot, I'm taking more fully advantage of our house being on Smith Mountain Lake, where we have some fun toys to play with and things like that.
Awesome. Hey, Dave, let's close this one out by you telling us about your family, your immediate family.
Yeah, so I'm really blessed. I have an amazing family. I got to start with my wife, Diane, right? Met her at DuPont in Memphis, and she spent 41 years in a variety of roles with DuPont. The last one being contract manufacturing manager for the companies that take Tyvek from the site there in Spruance and process it into the final product, house wrap, envelopes, clean room gowns, all the different things they do with it. So been very blessed there. We have 2 adult kids. Our daughter, Stephanie, is a chemical and biomolecular engineer. She's married to a chemist, Robert. They live in and work in Research Triangle Park, and they have a 1.5-year-old grandson. So got some grandkids figuring in there. And then our son is a graduate. Oh, by the way, our daughter went to Georgia Tech, did not go to VT. And Robert went to UConn. But then our son, John, and his wife, Jenny, they live in Fort Mill, South Carolina, just south of Charlotte. They're both Hokies. John's a mechanical engineer and Jenny's a CPA. And they have 2 boys. And John works for a privately owned company called Hoffman and Hoffman. Their business is commercial HVAC upfits and new buildings both. And he has a territory that he works with them. And he's a sales executive there. And then I have 2 sisters, and then we have 3 nieces. 2 nieces and a nephew, and 4 grand nephews in that crowd. So we got about 7 boys in the next generation in my dad and Diane's dad's family. It's pretty cool. And we do a lot with the kids. We do a lot of sporting events. We do a lot of, well, the older boys are now playing lacrosse. They're a little bit older than, so the ones in Charlotte are playing lacrosse. So we get to see them play a little bit. And we go to sporting events a lot. And I should say one final closeout. Last year for Christmas, my wife, who is just awesome, got me a pair of tickets to the practice round at Augusta National.
Man.
For the Masters.
Man.
And it was for my son and I to go, not her. John and I went to the practice round at Augusta National and walked the course. And in the practice round, the players are they play with whoever they want to. They're having fun. They hit a shot and they don't like it. They hit another one, and television doesn't even come close to showing you what that course really looks like and how unbelievably difficult it is. It is so up and down, and you just can't see that on TV. And so that was a bucket list highlight from last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you got to do the Indy 500, the NCAA basketball tournament, 204 games, and go to the Masters for a practice round, you've lived a full sporting life. Sports.
Yeah. We've been to the President's Cup. We've been to the PGA. Been to the U.S. Open twice, all golf. And I've probably seen, I've probably seen somewhere between 50 and 75 Carolina Hurricane hockey games, which I do with our daughter. So, if you like sports. And I forgot, a couple of years ago when the Phillies were in the World Series, we were there for Game 1 in Philadelphia, World Series.
Yeah, you mentioned Pittsburgh Pirates. I'll just tell you, I was dating a young lady back in the early 90s from Pittsburgh, and her stepdad had some connections with the Pirates. we literally sat behind the starting shortstop's wife, right behind home plate for game 2 against the Braves. And then game 7 happened in NLCS. And he had a lot of pull, but not enough pull to get us behind home plate again. I couldn't see the baseball. We were so high up in
Well, my sister has, my youngest sister has a pair of season tickets for about 15 or 20 games, something like that. Okay. It's a partial pack. And so she was the one able to get tickets, and she was able to get 4. So my sister, my son, my nephew Andrew, and I were together in the 500 level, looking down third base line, and city of Philly in the distance beyond center field. That place was rocking. And it's the only game in that World Series against the Astros that the Phillies won. They got swept after that, but it was cool. World Series. So I haven't seen the British Open. I don't know if we're going to get that or not. I have to think about that one, but that's the only major golf tournament that I have not seen. So
that'd be a great one to go, especially, well, all those courses have been around for hundreds of years. Yeah. It seems like. Very cool, Dave. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Thanks for talking.
This was a blast, Paul. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I love the opportunity to talk sports, in case you didn't notice that.
You are the biggest sports fan I've ever talked to, I think. And I'm around a lot of big sports fans.
Yeah. Well,
appreciate you doing this.
I love it. And it creates a lot of really cool memories of doing these things with our kids and friends and whatnot. So it is about the sports, but it's also about those memories and those special times. So, well, look, all the best to you. And thanks again for having me on.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd also really appreciate if you'd rate and review us. You can find us at scodupodcast.com.